Good evening and welcome to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. A lot to get to here today after a win, but kind of a discouraging win. Was the win more concerning, beating the Broncos, than it was losing to the Cincinnati Bengals? We'll talk about it. What does 14 straight wins against the Denver Broncos really mean? Is it getting the pub it deserves? What was bigger for Mahomes, the spectacular plays or the 3 interceptions? Is he in the MVP lead anymore when it comes to the NFL? Is he giving that to Jalen Hurts? Is Josh Allen in front of him? What do you make of the running backs now? The turnover battle for the Chiefs is not going well, yet no one's really talking about it. Can you trust this defense? What do you do with Chris Jones? Extend, trade, play it out? What's his future with the Kansas City Chiefs? Can anything be taken from this week against the Texans? We'll make our predictions. It's all coming up here on Red, Gold, and Bold.
This is the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric is the senior VP of Research and Development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Yes, indeed. Like we said, a lot to get to. Jeff Chadiha, NFL Network. He's there on the lower portion of your screen. If you're catching us via the stream, remember, if you get us on the podcast, we stream live. It is Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Central. Eric Eager is on the upper right square, VP of Research and Development at Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro. I'm on the top left. I don't know why. I think that's just how it generated this time. A lot to get to. As we said, a lot of topics we want to hit upon. And, Jeff, I can't wait to hear the positive nature you have after a win. You don't apologize for wins in the NFL, right? Let me hear it. There's nothing. This was much better than what happened in Cincinnati, right?
I never complain about wins in the NFL. I never crap on them. And so I think that if you win a game, you take it and you should be happy about it. And the Chiefs should do that. You don't apologize for it. Look, another 10-win season, a chance to win the AFC West. You extend some streaks against Denver and on the road in the AFC West. Were there red flags? Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can't sit here and say that they aren't, because this team isn't just about winning 10 games anymore. It's not just about winning the AFC West anymore. It's about competing for championships. And so they've lost to Buffalo, they've lost to Cincinnati, and they could have lost to the Denver Broncos in a game that, as we all sat here last week and talked about, I think the most guaranteed prediction we could have made was that the Broncos were not going to score more than 20 points in this game. And so to get 28 in a game like this, to have the interceptions and the defense coming out of it with a lot of questions, that's a big red flag for me. But I will give them credit for the win, because, again, it's hard to get those in the NFL.
It is hard to get them, and on any given Sunday, right? We say it all the time. No one likes to hear it when it's their team that's getting gotten at that point. Eric, what is it? Can you just chalk it up and say, all right, this was just not the kind of game that they wanted to have, but it's the NFL, and that's all that matters, is getting the W? Or do we look at it and say, with some of the issues they had against Cincinnati, this is just more of the same, and it shows momentum going in the wrong direction for this team?
But they weren't the issues they had against Cincinnati at all, right? The issues they had against Cincinnati were
is
they
that
couldn't
better? Fresh problems?
Well, sure, but I mean, the Chiefs have had these problems against inferior teams all year: turnovers, sloppy play, penalties, things like that. Like that's been what they've done all year. The defensive problems, I mean, tackling has been an issue for a while, right? But they got 6 sacks. They got a turnover. They scored on defense right there last week at this time. Like, we were like, oh, everybody can get to Joe Burrow except for the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, And I know Denver's not very good, but they got 6 sacks on Denver. That was a correction, however we want to adjust for opponent. They got a turnover with Willie Gay with the pick sixing on a 4th down, Russell Wilson. So there were some positives to take from it. I obviously, like, not every turnover put them in horrendous positions from an offensive or defensive standpoint, but I'd like to think that if Mahomes doesn't throw a couple interceptions at the end of the half, it is a laugher, right? It was 27-0. The Broncos were not did they cross midfield before the end of the first? There were parts to take from it. I just feel like Mahomes, the interceptions opened the door for Denver to catch a little bit of luck and then, ride on that. I don't know. I'm not taking as many negatives from this game other than the fact that the Chiefs have to take care of the ball. But that has been a problem sort of all season that I think, can be corrected.
It has been a problem all season. And since it's been a problem all season, Jeff, why would we think they're going to correct it now? Is some of the stats. Let's go down that road. I mean, I think we hit upon, there's a lot of things we want to discuss, as we mentioned to open the show, but 27th in plus minus, 23rd in takeaways, 26th in giveaways. Mahomes has 11 INTs. That's tied for the 3rd most in the National Football League. But I think Eric said it, and he added on. He said this has been a problem all year. It has. Adding on that it can be fixed sounds good, but why do we think it's going to be fixed when we're 13 games in?
I don't believe it's going to be fixed. I totally think this is who this team is at this stage, and it's manageable because the quarterback is so good. And we had this conversation a few weeks back about him lifting this team up and playing at a high level and doing a lot for this team. And he does obscure numbers that kill ordinary teams. The numbers you just rattled off. Yeah, I think people don't understand. Those numbers, those turnover numbers are in the same neighborhood as the Saints and the Colts and the Texans and the Rams, teams that are we sit here and we just crap on every week.
Yeah, no, just to your point, to underscore it, Jeff, what Jeff's talking about. The Chiefs are at -5. The Browns are at -5. The Texans are at -5. The Rams are at -6. The Saints are at -12, and the Colts are at -14. This is Crapsville. Population, crappy teams, and a 10-3 Chiefs. So it is not a place. It's not a village you want to live in, Jeff.
No, it's not. It's not. And so the red flag on the offensive side when it comes to Mahomes is that the margin for error is so slim. And I think that's been, again, obscured because he's so good at it. And we get enamored with the spectacular plays like the flip to McKinnon and the touchdown pass to Juju late in the game. Those are amazing plays. But end of the day, when you need to beat a Cincinnati or beat a Buffalo, you just can't afford those kind of mistakes. And it's not putting it all on him. Obviously, Kelsey had the big fumble against Buffalo, against the Bengals. But when you're having those kinds of turnover problems and you're not getting turnovers, which is the other part of it on the defensive end, and we'll get to that later, but you're playing with fire when it comes to playing against really good quarterbacks and really good offenses. And so, it is. I think it's easy to avoid the conversation or easy to do what Eric just said and just say, hey, it's going to get better because they're just a great offense with a great quarterback and a great coach. But the numbers are still the numbers. And I think that's what should be concerning for people.
Eric, Phil Steele, who used, I guess he still does. I don't know if he puts it out anymore, but the college football kind of annual yearbook. And he had all these things at the beginning that were kind of, all right, there were statistical trends to look for to help you have a gambling advantage. And one of the first ones I remember reading was turnovers equal turnaround. And that any team that was super plus on the turnover one year, you can kind of count on the ball bouncing the other way the next year and be negative. That's always stuck with me. And I think it does, particularly any teams, good teams that had a really bad, traditionally good teams, good coaches that have a bad turnover year and it drags their record down. You can expect them to bounce back the next year. Teams that kind of come out of nowhere and you look at it and wow, they were plus 27. You can kind of expect the ball to bounce the other way and go against them. It evens out more in the pros. The pros are the pros. They're better at it. There are guys that have made a living at being great on the plus minus. Marty Schottenheimer, generally at the cost of being explosive, generally at the cost of, we saw what Marty Schottenheimer teams looked like. They were very good regular season, churn out regular season wins. But when you got into the playoffs and you needed to consistently convert 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s in bad weather, you couldn't do it. So you kind of said, and I'm kind of with Jeff, I'm more concerned, I think, than you are. Is it the math of it that they're due for a hot run of being +2, +3, +1, +2, +3, +4, here moving forward? Or was that, maybe you'd phrase it a different way now presented with this?
Yeah, I mean, last season we were talking about the exact same things, right? Mahomes had 10 interceptions in the first 8 weeks of the season. And what was it, the first 7 games or something like that? He had only 3 interceptions the remaining, 9 games of the year, right? So, like we talked about, last year was something of the ball bouncing off receivers' hands and stuff like that more than it was Mahomes throwing errant passes. But you just have it's a streaky thing, right? Turnovers are a streaky thing. I think that the hard part is going to be, is this defense capable of creating big turnovers to sort of complement that, right? Because I personally think that Mahomes is not going to throw 3 interceptions in a game very often. And so he'll probably be fine. And if he throws 1 fewer interception on Sunday, the Chiefs win by multiple scores. And we're not really all that nervous about this game. So on the offensive side of the ball, I'm not as concerned because of what you said. These things oscillate, and generally speaking, like they come in bunches, and and just like we saw last year, they came in bunches early. They dissipated late. This year they've come a little bit now over the last couple weeks. The problem I have is, can the defense generate turnovers? And I don't know, getting 6 sacks really helps. When's the last time the Chiefs had a strip sack of a quarterback? When's the last time, the ball, was intercepted in the middle of the field? It was like the Los Angeles game, like that kind of thing. The defense needs to force if they force a turnover in the Bengals game, they win, right? Or they get a sack at some point in that game, they win. And my concern is almost always, can the Chiefs be explosive enough on defense to do that? The offensive side of the ball, I think, always kind of goes. And Andy Reid and Mahomes, with the exception of the championship game last year, like generally speaking, come to play on that side when the games count the most.
Yeah, and listen, Andy Reid plus Patrick Mahomes is always a good place to start. So I don't think any of us are going, this team's screwed. Look out, they're going to turn it over 6 times every game the rest of the way. I don't think that's it. But to the point about, hey, it's, if they get some turnovers, then we're not talking about this. They did. They got 2 takeaways, right? They had 2 takeaways in this game. The offense just gave it away 3 times. And, I do think there's some anomaly to that, Jeff. But, listen, if I were to put my role and put my Jeff Chadiha hat on, and I don't think I have my lucky hat. I don't down here. But if I were to put
the KU one, KC, that's KC back there.
Yeah, I've got Royals and Chiefs and Sporting and Syracuse.
Okay.
My Traeger hat, I've got a number down here. But if I were to do it, I'd say, well, why isn't, like, we've got the beginning of last year where they were turning the ball over a lot. Then we've got a stretch where they were better last year. Now we've got this year where they've been turning the ball over a lot. We just mentioned it. They're 26th in giveaways and tied for 27th. I mean, however you want to look at it, they're 26th and 27th in giveaways. Why isn't the stretch where they were good in the second half of last year the anomaly, since it's got sides on both ends? I mean, Travis Kelce wasn't catching the ball in this game very well, right? He let a touchdown go through his hands. We've seen him make some remarkable catches, go back and save Patrick Mahomes. I'm not trying to get on Travis Kelce, one of the greatest tight ends to ever play. But if it goes through his hands, hey, that one hit the ground. What's to say the next one's not up in the air? And we're right back looking at plays like we saw last year early on, where, yes, no one worried about it because, well, those were drops, and so those don't really count. Yeah, they do count. These are still the guys he's throwing to, right?
Yeah, and it's always easier to dismiss this stuff when you're winning games. But again, I remember when we talked about the Tennessee game, for example, and I said if Ryan Tannehill's playing, good chance they lose. Oh, no. Mahomes will pull it out. No. Okay, Chargers, first game. Asante Samuel drops 2 interceptions. One right in his hands, another potential pick 6. Oh, no. Chargers going to Charger. Raiders game. Devontae Adams drops a catch on the sideline instead of a game-winning field goal. No, that's what the Raiders do. It's always easy to go to that. But we're having a different conversation. If this team is sitting here at whatever 7-6 instead of 10-4, instead of 10-3, right? Because it's easier to. So I don't think you have to have the losses to have the conversation. I think it's okay to say that these. I think there are issues, and I get that Mahomes is a great quarterback. Let me say this clearly: he's the best quarterback in the world. But even the best quarterbacks have their issues, and you can't ignore that when this team has played the two biggest competitors to winning the AFC Championship. He hasn't played great. He's had some great moments, but he had 2 interceptions against Buffalo, and he couldn't get over the 250-yard mark against Cincinnati. And going back to the previous game against Cincinnati last year, he had a horrible second half. Yeah. That matters. I mean, at some point you have to not just go off, well, this is what he does in the great moments and the numbers look great and look at all these highlights. It's like he's having some issues in these moments too that I think are easy to blow off just because he's so spectacular.
But Jeff, to answer your question, Petro, the reason is he only had 11 interceptions total in 2019 and 2020, right? Like I think, and he never threw an interception in September until last year. Like, he's had 2 stretches now of play where he threw a lot of interceptions in a career that's now 5 years as a starter. Does that, I get what Jeff's saying, and I agree, actually. I agree that, like, it's sloppy, right? Like, and he's making up for a lot and that kind of thing. But I do think it finds its levels, right?
But Eric, this stat too. How many interceptable balls did he throw in those years where he wasn't putting up big interceptions?
A lot. I think that some of that has to do with the velocity that he throws the ball. And like, I think frankly, Mahomes doesn't throw. I don't know. I could be wrong, but you guys sense Mahomes doesn't put as much on the ball anymore because I think it's, I don't know. He's become more of a finesse thrower, I guess. And maybe that's contributing.
I think it might be they're flooding the zone with so many people. He's got to be more of a touch thrower.
Yeah,
he's got to get it over one level, but not too far over the next level. And so he's happened to kind of drop them in.
He's not play. I mean, the biggest part of it is that offenses are making him throw the ball more. Like to get a touchdown, if you're not scoring 35-yard touchdown plays or 50-yard touchdown plays, your likelihood of an interception just does go up because you're crossing the street a bunch of times. So you're going to get hit by a car at some point. And I think that the too high shells and stuff like that have really made for that. Now this year they don't play as much too high shells, but because their wide receivers aren't as explosive, they still have, it's effectively the same thing that they have to manufacture touchdown drives out of 10-play drives. And those things are going to be more prone to error just mathematically than 5-play drives.
How about this? The Rams, they haven't won the turnover battle since the Chargers, right? They've tied it, but they haven't won it. They lost it. They in this game against the Broncos, the Chiefs had 3 turnovers. The Broncos had 2 against the Bengals. The Chiefs have 1. The Bengals had none against the Rams. It was 2 each. How about they just played 3 good defenses? All 3 teams have got good talent, and we'll get to the Chiefs defense a little bit more in depth here in a minute, but because one of the questions we asked is why isn't there more discussion about the plus minus? One, it is a good team that can overcome it. They are largely 10-3. That's the biggest reason why nobody's talking about it. But I think to Jeff's point, and for people who just want to hear somebody blow smoke up your ass, this is hard to hear that maybe your team isn't perfect at everything. It is a problem. It kept the Broncos in the game. And if you had that kind of game against the Bills, it would get you beat. You had the game against the Bengals, it got you beat. And I think that's the point is, can they find a way to continue to hang 30-plus points and not give the ball away? And that's where they've got to get. And I'm just saying, like, I think it's going to take a really – listen, I was very bullish in 19, and maybe it was ignorance. Maybe I got lucky. Right. And how bullish I was that they were going to go to the Super. Jeff and I made a bet. I was, bragging up the Chiefs, and they got there. I bragged them up in 20. I bragged them up going into the Bucs game. They got beat. Why? Because they couldn't protect the quarterback, which crippled their offense. They got beat last year because some of these issues that we're talking about right now were there. I think it's real because I think they've got to, and we've had this discussion before. Like, are they impatient trying to get to 40 points? Are they trying to be the 2018 offense? Because that's fun, man. I get it. Let's party. Let's go. Let's make it happen. Get everybody over here. Sometimes you got to look around and be like, yeah, there's 8 of us, right? This ain't going to be a rager. Like, let's just have a good time. Let's chill, but we ain't going till 4 a.m. It's just like, let's just have a good time and make it happen. And I don't know that I think that's the point here is, have Andy Reid and more so Patrick Mahomes gotten over the need to have the big game, and will it ultimately cost him? And I think if you're a Chiefs fan, what you hope, Jeff, is that we saw Patrick Mahomes looking disgusted on the bench, and he wants to win more than he wants to pile up stats. And that wake-up call came in this game against the Broncos, that he's pissed at the Broncos. He feels like he kept the Broncos hanging around in this thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's very, very likely. I'm sure. I don't for a second think Mahomes doesn't regret some of these mistakes. And I think really the argument we're having, the discussion we're having, isn't about, is Patrick Mahomes a problem, or is this a problem? It's really about what kind of quarterback is he going to be in situations when there's more pressure on the offense. And I think in these games that they've been able to win, they haven't had to feel that kind of pressure that they feel when they're playing the Bengals, when they're playing the Bills, when the other offense can really get after you. And now we're at a point where the defense, while it was encouraging early, can he trust that defense now? And will that lead to more forced throws? Will that lead to because really the way the offense has been built and been constructed and the way they've executed, it has been more about longer drives, more plays being involved, taking what the defense is giving you. And he's played very well within that structure. But I often believe that personalities don't change. And I think he's a gunslinger at heart. I think he wants to go toe-to-toe with the Josh Allen, with the Joe Burrows. And when you're in that mentality and you don't have some of the things he's had in the past, it can be difficult. I go back to that Buffalo game. That first interception he threw in that Buffalo game was more about, I got to make a play here than I got to be conservative or conscious of not turning the ball over. And I think there is a little bit of a balance that he's going to have to live with for the rest of this season that he hasn't had to live with before.
Eric, do you believe that Patrick Mahomes is still in the driver's seat for the MVP? He's not the betting odds, at least one of the books I looked at. He had fallen behind Jalen Hurts on FanDuel. Do you believe he's the guy to win it, though, even if he's not the betting favorite right now? Obviously, coming off the 3 picks, keeping the Broncos in there, dinged him. But do you think with the schedule he's got in front of him, that helps or hurts him?
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, here's some free betting advice to all the people who live in Kansas and are listening to our show. If you can find a no on Jalen Hurts, bet it because it's plus money. If you can buy Patrick Mahomes, bet it because, Philly's going to Chicago. That's a horrid defense. But it's not a notable game. Like all the reasons that you wouldn't bet Mahomes, exist for Jalen Hurts as well, right? You have Chicago's not a notable game. You're probably going to win that by a country mile. New Orleans is not a notable game. You're probably going to win that game by a country mile. And I believe they have the Giants one more time again. I was actually in Philly for that game this Sunday watching with my friend Zach, who's an analyst for the Eagles. And that one they might not even play Hurts, right? So there's an aspect of like he's not going to be able to run up the stat score on Patrick Mahomes. And Mahomes has, obviously they don't have any notable games left either. But again, Hurts is at the very top of the market right now, right? There's not a whole lot he can do to kind of like a signature game against Chicago is not going to be meaningful. The Dallas game is a leak for him. That's the best defense that either of these two teams face, the Chiefs or the Eagles. And that game could really be an interception game for Hurts, which Patrick has already had his interception games, right? Like, and so I think Mahomes.
They're gone, Jeff. It's good to know they're gone.
Yeah.
They're finished.
You think he's going to throw picks against the Houston Texans?
I think there's a chance, a good chance. He threw a pick against the Rams.
The Rams have personnel. I mean,
the Rams have Houston's a war zone out there, right? Like, so I think Mahomes should still be the favorite. I think he will be. He leads the league in QBR. He leads the league in expected points added per dropback. He leads the league in touchdown pass. He leads the league in yards per game. Like, we're gonna wake up and be like, hey, what are we doing, boys? Like, and the funniest part is we dropped him in the MVP odds on a game where he threw 2 stupid touchdown passes. Where, like, you go back and think, like, I don't know. What happens if you switch these 2 quarterbacks? What's the record for each team?
Eric, I'll be the guy who is who reigns on this parade. MVP voters aren't that sophisticated. They're not going to pour through all those stats and make these arguments. They're going to say, okay, Patrick Mahomes threw 3 picks against Denver and kept the Broncos in the game, and he lost to the Bengals. And Jalen Hurts just had a 48-point game, and he's on a team that's 12-1. That's what it's going to come down to. That's why Hurts is in the driver, and he plays on the East Coast. And he's a new thing.
Yeah, I think Hurts right now, because I'm starting to buy in that he's legitimately this good, and his team is good, and it's not just the games. He's got name brand games with big markets, right?
Yep.
Like that's the other part of it. That if you look at it, the Chiefs' remaining games at Houston's not going to. I don't care what Mahomes does, unless he goes for 495 and 7 touchdowns and has a couple of SportsCenter highlight plays. There's nothing he's going to do in this game that is going to help him. He's got Seattle. That gives him a shot. Denver, not going to help. At Vegas, can only hurt. I don't think there's anything you can do against Vegas now at this point because they're not a playoff team. The Eagles, you said it this week. Yeah, okay, they've got Chicago, but at Dallas is a monster game. And I think it's Christmas Eve. Did Tommy say it's Christmas Eve, that game? Yeah, it's going to be the primetime game on Christmas Eve. Everybody looking to already eject on the family is going to be watching that thing. And then he's got the Giants in the finisher. Right now, you're right. If he sits in that doesn't help him. But if he sits in it, that's a reason why he's the MVP, because he's led his team to a point where he doesn't have to play. So I don't see where there's any negative there. I actually think that Hurts is in the driver's seat. I think that this really hurt Mahomes. Yeah. And I think maybe the Bengals game put the doubt, and then the 3 turnovers against the Broncos. I think he was winning it with the underhand shovel. I think he was in front. He took a step forward, and 3 picks knocked him 3 steps back and put Jalen Hurts 1 step in front. I don't think he's unbeatable, but I think it's Hurts' award now to lose.
Okay. I mean, I think, again, I just think you're buying him at the absolute top. 3 weeks ago, he needed, like, they got a game-winning touchdown pass or game-winning touchdown drive in Indianapolis against Jeff Saturday's team without him throwing a pass. I think that, he obviously loses on some Monday Night Football to the Washington football team. And, like, if he goes to Dallas and they're underdogs in that game and Dallas whips them, beats them up pretty good, and he shows limitations as a passer, then the fact that Patrick Mahomes has 4 kind of games where the Chiefs are going to be favored by a touchdown or so or more, like, I think that benefits Mahomes, right? Like, so I agree with you. If Hurts runs the table here, then yeah, of course. I just think Mahomes has a better chance of running the table than Jalen Hurts does, right? It's the MVP award is going to the guy who runs the table. And I think Hurts is not going to be, like, I don't think Hurts
run it.
Yeah.
Okay. If they both run it, then it's Hurts, I think. But
so Hurts is in the driver's seat right now then.
But I think the likelihood that the Chiefs run the table is higher than the likelihood the Eagles run the table.
I actually would agree with that, because I think at Dallas, I don't know, the Giants are falling apart. If Dallas doesn't get him, I don't know who does. And if Dallas does get him, as long as he goes down valiantly and has a good game.
But Soren makes a great point. He's getting points for beating up on a mediocre Giants team in a huge market.
Yeah.
Like 48-22 over the Houston Texans is not going to move the meter for Mahomes, but Hurts goes back and gets another 3 or 4 touchdowns against the Giants. They're going to be talking about it all over the East Coast.
Because the Giants, and that's the thing. Like, I think if you were to quantify it, Eric, like if you were to go data, yeah, I think you might be. I think the data would say Patrick Mahomes, more touchdowns, all those more interceptions too, more turnovers. I mean, Jalen Hurts is taking care of the ball better. You could look at it and say, well, the Eagles have the better 2-53. So therefore, Mahomes is doing more to put his team where it is. I think you can give quantifiable data and make a case, a very strong case for Patrick Mahomes. But I think Jeff nailed it. We're talking about what are these people going to do? And I'm going to tell you, I had this conversation with Gary Parrish, my college basketball insider, about the AP top 25. And I think you see it every year, right? These voters are no different than the AP voters in college football or college basketball. Every year, the AP is rolling along and you can kind of project where it is. And then after they put their poll out, on a Tuesday comes the first playoff poll. And the playoff poll is different. And the next week, immediately, all of the AP switches their votes to look just like the playoff poll. Why? Because they don't want to stand alone. Nobody wants to have to defend their position. Nobody likes to be run down. Nobody likes to hear. I know I see it. I don't mind it because I'm messed up. That's why I'm a talk show. So it doesn't bother me to stand alone. I'll tell you what I think, good or bad, right or wrong. But most people aren't like that. And so, we're not saying it's not about who is, it's about who's going to win it. And who's going to win it, I think, right now is Jalen Hurts.
Well, and also, they've hyped the NFC East up to the point now where people are saying, oh, look, all these teams are in the playoff hunt. All these teams are winning. That helps being a one-loss team versus Mahomes with disappointing Raiders, disappointing Chargers, disappointing Broncos.
They're a one-loss team with the entire division in the playoffs if they were to happen today. And even though the Giants are falling apart and I don't think will be in the playoffs, they're still going to be given credit because they've been on the hype train early on. That's just where I think it's going to go. What do we think of the running backs? Because a couple things here. One, Isaiah Pacheco has exceeded the expectations of both Eric and I. And I think almost everybody, let's give Brett Veach, Andy Reid, and the Chiefs coaches and front office a lot of credit for finding this guy. He is getting better. He is learning some vision. He is learning some patience. And then let's give Eric some credit on Jerick McKinnon, who he called kind of break glass in case of emergency. That McKinnon, it's like, listen, we got to get him to the finals. Then when we really need him, we'll break him out there. It's the combination, Eric, of these two, right? Like we've kind of got a hammer. You got your thunder and lightning. Pacheco hammers away. They needed to get a first down on the ground to kill the clock. He bulldozes through a couple of arm tackles. And you need screen passes and pass protection. Jerick McKinnon does it. And I'll give Andy Reid credit. He's never mixed running backs like this before. It was always a guy. And then when you're tired, come out. But a guy. He seems to be getting the most out of the skill set of his running backs right now. And by the way, the skill sets are pretty good, are they not?
Yeah, I think, for one, part of being an analyst is admitting you're wrong on a player, because especially when that player plays for your favorite team, because you don't want to sit there and root against him, right? So like Isaiah Pacheco has done really good. And honestly, he's exceeded my expectations as a pass receiver. They're actually using him in that part of the game as well, which I think, is pretty solid. Obviously the worry is that he runs with such reckless abandon that like it could be a short shelf life for him. And we've seen guys like Charkandrick West and Spencer Ware and guys like that come into Kansas City, have some success for a short amount of time, and then peter out a little bit. So I do still think McKinnon is their running back that they play when they need kind of an everyman running, like a guy to make every play, because McKinnon is running the football well, but you don't want to give him 15 carries a game. And he's obviously receiving the ball and doing things out of the backfield well. So I think it's a great group. It's funny that Ronald Jones is wearing a jersey every week and not getting carries. Like there's no use for him apparently. So yeah, I like the group. I think like with Pacheco, it's running hard. It's adding a physicality that the offensive line likes. And it's something that they missed with Edwards-Helaire for sure. So yeah, I nothing to say here.
Yeah. What do you think of the running backs and how they're being used now, Jeff?
Well, I always like Pacheco. And more so, less the actual player, more the way his attitude. His skill set is evolving, but they needed to have somebody with that kind of an aggressive, violent running style to make people respect the run game a little more. And so I think that is what I've liked seeing. And they've gotten better at using McKinnon. It almost feels as if Andy got to the point where he said he and Bieniemy and Nagy got together and said, why are we trying to throw the ball to Fortson and Noah Gray all the time? We can give it to these guys and get more out of it. And so if that's the way they're going to go, I think it is the way to go. And we have seen Andy just do things for a couple weeks and then go to a different route or go back to other things. I hope he sticks with this because it is a positive combination. The skill sets mesh. I think someone put in the comment section, it's almost like if you put these two guys together, that's what they'd hoped that Edwards-Helaire would have ended up being. So they've realized or figured out we got two of these guys. Let's make it work with them. But again, it's going to be, Denver's a good defense. I don't want to take anything away from the Broncos and what they did in that game. But again, I think when you've got more pressure on you, you've got to score more points. Will they be that committed to using these guys in the way they use them against the Bills or against the Bengals?
I will go back to saying Ronald Jones, I think, could absolutely be a part of this equation. And I don't understand why Isaiah Pacheco was out there hammering away at the end of the game against the Rams. And a couple of people have put it out. He's now starting to show up on the injury report. Andy Reid brought up Ronald Jones' name this week. He at least will talk about him. He doesn't act like he's not there. He's like, we got a pretty good back and Ronald Jones too, just sitting there on the bench. Get him into the game.
Whatever that means.
Well, I mean,
he's still in the building.
McKinnon didn't get real run for this team until the playoffs last year. Like, this is not. I mean, even the 2019 season when they won the Super Bowl, like Damian Williams was the key back and for that team. Like half the games, and the other half he disappeared. So I think that what we've learned this year, and Thomas, who's given me a lot of shit for Pacheco, now calling him Steven Jackson 2.0. See that? These are the things I fight back against. That is nonsense. But Steven Jackson, a number one draft pick, longtime great Ram. I'll bet the house against that. But the thing that Pacheco has proved that he can do.
So you have to be a first round running back to be great.
No, but the prior is a little higher for Steven Jackson, is it not?
Yeah, sure.
But the thing that Isaiah Pacheco has proven this year is that much like the guys before him, the Damian Williamses and the Sean McCoys and the Spencer Wares and those guys, like he's very much good enough to carry this mantle for however, for a 6 to 8 week stretch. And that really was a bar that unfortunately Clyde Edwards-Helaire since his rookie year was unable to carry.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Pacheco can do, in addition to learning how to pass protect and become more of a receiver, is protect himself a little better, right? Like he runs like Walter Payton, ran, and I'm not saying it's Walter Payton. I'm saying he runs like him in the sense that he does not shy away from any contact. And I think the modern game has proven you don't need to be ringing your bell that many times. If you can step out and get out without taking another hit, you live to fight another day. I mean, what Walter Payton did was amazing. He also died at an ungodly early age. Did football have something to do with it? Maybe not, but maybe so. I mean, we've seen a lot of guys get really banged up, and you'd like to see him be on the field for this Chiefs offense as they come down the stretch. What about the defense, Jeff? Can you trust this defense? You phrased that question that way. I assume you have the answer for it.
Yeah. Now the podcast really begins, right? No, you can't trust this defense. You couldn't trust them 2 weeks ago. And I was trying to say that back then, but we had to go through all this, this rigmarole to get to where we are right now, which is the obvious. Yeah, it's a big problem. It's going to keep them, it's going to cost them the playoffs. And that there are a lot of different variables involved in that, but including an offense that has to be better at taking care of the football and not put them in bad positions. But when you put them in bad positions and you expect them to do good things and you're looking at their numbers, I mean, we can get deep into what was the number I heard today on Jason Anderson's show on your midday show on your station. He said that something like, it was some crazy stat about 80% of the passes attempted to receivers, the top two receivers on opposing teams have been completed in the last 5 weeks. It was something like he mentioned Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Jerry Jeudy have been targeted 22 times in the last 2 games, 18 passes completed. Like crazy numbers. Right. And so I know the sack numbers are up there, but it just shows you how much sacks don't matter if you're not marrying your pass rush to your back end. And this is, I said it before, and I know Daniel Sorensen was was a great punching bag the last few years, but Juan Thornhill is not the answer. Justin Reed is not the answer. And Steve Spagnuolo's got to figure that out because he's putting his corners in situations where they can't succeed.
Eric?
No. What? I mean, come on. Like this, we're overreacting to a Denver game that was seeded.
Wait a minute.
A Denver game.
Let me phrase the question again, and let's make sure that there is the answer. Can you trust? Can the Kansas City Chiefs defense be trusted?
Yes. For what they're being asked to be, which is an average NFL defense, I trust them. Okay, let's go through some numbers here.
So you're good. Let me quantify what I hear and trust. You're good with punting the ball back at 4th and 7 against the Bengals because you trust the defense is going to get a stop.
But that's not the bar. I trust the defense.
That's trust, isn't it?
I mean, did they punt the ball back to Denver in the game Sunday and get a stop?
Like, I think you and I will talk, and to a lesser degree, Jeff, but you and I will talk about what Andy Reid should do on offense, and I think we will say exactly the same thing. And I'm going to tell you what it means. It means you can't trust the defense.
I advocated for kicking against the Bengals precisely because they have the best offense in the entire league, and they were facing a great offense. That the Chiefs defense being hurt, like the Chiefs defense being not the 0-2 Bucks or the 2000 Ravens or whatever is not really in the equation. Okay, let me, and I know that there are more advanced ways to look at this. So I'm going to use Pro Football Reference here, and I'm going to look at yards per play. The Chiefs are 14th in the NFL in yards per play. They are in net yards per pass attempt. The Kansas City Chiefs are 10th in that, 10th best in football in net yards per pass attempt. In yards per rush, the Chiefs are 17th. In expected points, and again, like there are multiple different ways to compute expected points. So they're 18th. Turnover per drive, the Chiefs at 9% or 22nd. That's the weakness we've already highlighted. And if you look at DVOA is the one where if you look at Football Outsiders are the bottom third of the league. So again, paint that with a grain of salt. This is not a bottom feeding defense. This is not a defense you can't win the Super Bowl with. This is a defense that you can win with. This is never going to be a defense, nor should it have ever been a defense, especially given the number of rookies that they're playing. This has never been a defense that you can win because of. And even despite that, they've won games because of their defense this year. They won the first Chargers game because of their defense. They were in the game against the Colts because of their defense. A number of turnovers, number of BS touchdowns that were scored on short fields. Their defense has had a couple bad weeks in a row relative to what we expected out of them. But I think that this defense, come January, will be just fine. Thank you very much. The same way that they were just fine last January. And to me, I think we're overreacting a little bit, and
they were just fine until you turn around and they scored 27 points and lost to the Bengals, right? Wasn't that what the final was? 30-27.
No, they scored 24 points and 3 in the second half of the game.
Right, but they got to 24 in a playoff game, right?
The Bengals' only second half touchdown, Soren, was scored on a short field on a B.J. Hill interception. What are we doing here?
I get it, but at the end of the day, they lost. So citing last year as the defense being okay, here's where I object to what you're saying is that I like this. This was, he said. Matt said, I understand what Eric is saying. The Bengals situation was a clock issue to me. Our defense isn't great, but I think my pea-sized brain gets his point. Okay. Yeah, it was a clock issue because they let the defense go back out there. I mean, they did the exact same thing that the Rams did twice on Monday Night Football, and they won. Now, Baker Mayfield was throwing it up for grabs, and prayers were being answered, although the Reynolds curved around and got from under. But there was one prayer that was answered in there. My point is they put the Rams defense out there, and the Rams got stops. The Chiefs defense didn't get stops. I would say that, no, this defense you cannot trust, although I'm in between the two of you, right? I'm not clear over on Jeff's, like they can't win with it. I think they can win with it if the offense plays smarter. But no, you can't trust this team. And it's not a clock issue. It's a defense issue.
But can we
There was
pause?
plenty of time to get a stop and get the ball back.
Let's back up for a quick minute. I know that this defense isn't great, but they've gotten stops when they've needed to, when they've gotten behind in games. You look at this Chargers game. The Chargers game was a multiple score deficit in which their defense, now this might be a product of the Chargers who do this every freaking week, but both Chargers games, they needed their defense to get off the field multiple times in the second half to come back and take a lead in that game. And in both Chargers games, their defense did that. And that doesn't even account for the fact that they had a touchdown that, and the margin of victory this week was a touchdown by the defense.
What are we talking about here? Are we talking about putting together a glossy regular season record? Or are we talking about winning a championship?
Because I don't know. Against the Bengals.
But you keep citing a team that's not going to be in the game. They're not going to. As the playoffs stand right now, the Chargers aren't even there.
The Cincinnati Bengals scored one touchdown against the Chiefs after their first two drives.
But they still scored more points.
But Jeff, the problem with the Chiefs against the Bengals was their offense turned the ball over in the fourth quarter, and they could not. And their coach made a bad decision to kick a field goal instead of trusting the best player in the league. My bar for this defense is the 2018 AFC Championship game, where in the second half of the game, Patrick Mahomes evens the score with Tom Brady consistently, and your defense is so bad that you can't get off the field despite having multiple opportunities. The 2019 defense, they got behind 20-10 against the 49ers and got 3 stops and got that team the opportunity to put the best player in the game and get that team in the end zone. That's my bar for this defense. I don't like all of these games. The defense has not been run over, and they've gotten stops.
Okay, I mean, I guess
this is
I
how
don't
it's
think
supposed
anybody's
to be.
saying that they never get stops. I think they're saying, can you rely on this defense to stop a Joe Burrow or a Josh Allen when it matters? So I love you cited all these stats, but how about touchdown passes? Where are they ranking touchdown passes?
But Josh Allen game, they held the Buffalo Bills to 24 points, and in fact, a few of those were on a couple of those were noisy fourth down plays.
He did whatever he wanted in that game.
My issue.
He did whatever he wanted in that game. Joe Burrow did whatever he wanted. Those quarterbacks of that caliber never look flustered playing against the Chiefs defense. The whole point of playing defense is to confuse people, to affect them. There's no effect on that level of quarterbacks.
Yeah, but that's a win because of defense. I want no quarterback was flustered against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl against the 49ers either. They're good enough to make a play or two a game to put the game. If the Chiefs win the Super Bowl this year, it's because Patrick Mahomes is the best player on the planet.
Which means you don't trust the defense. Which is the definition of not trusting the defense. I don't think. Listen, Jeff is saying they can't win in the playoffs. I'm not saying they can't win in the playoffs. But if they're going to win in the playoffs, to quote you from last year, Patrick Mahomes is going to have to get white hot. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. But that's true no matter what their defense does, by the way. Because
it's this defense. but that's not true of every quarterback that goes into the Super Bowl.
Well, I mean, unless you want to rob Peter to pay Paul like the Rams did and take tomorrow's money to pay for today and get Von Miller, Jalen Ramsey, Eric Weddle,
we'll get to that with Chris Jones in a minute. That's a different discussion. It's the reality we live in as Chiefs fans. But it doesn't mean that we can't call it what it is, untrustworthy. It means when there's 3.5 minutes to go and you've got 4th and 7, leave Mahomes on the field.
Jeff, hopefully you can appreciate this because Jeff, I hope you can appreciate this because the roar has been restored. But in a week 4 game against the Seattle Seahawks, Jared Goff and the Lions offense put up 45 points, right? He put up 45 points. And because they could not get a singular stop against the Seattle Seahawks offense, the Lions are 6-7 now, by the way, white hot. And a game behind the Seattle Seahawks and not 7-6 and a game ahead. When I think of a defense, when people are talking about the Chiefs defense like they were the Lions that day, where it's just like, look, your quarterback's got to be perfect in order for you to win. And I categorically deny that. This defense makes enough plays and gets enough stops where this offense, which is a little worse than it's been in the past because of no Tyreek Hill, can still win 10 of the first 13 games. And I guarantee you that they're good enough for them to win the Super Bowl.
hey, straw man, who are people? Right? It's like Jeff and I. And there are names next to everyone who's putting something up in the comment section right now. So, like, listen, first of all, and the comment section almost never rains on the Chiefs. We know that. It's Chiefs fans, and they want their Chiefs to be good, and it's not their job to try and analyze it. Again, I'm not as far over as Jeff in saying that they can't win. But I think when you go through and say, well, no, they'll win. They need Mahomes to do this. When you are explaining why the defense is good enough and you say Patrick Mahomes, checkmate. It's over. Like it is on the offense to make it happen. Spagnuolo is got to dial up.
How do you guys defend the efficiency numbers? The efficiency numbers are middle of the pack. Like
we point to other numbers.
Andrew trusted the defense.
Broncos averaging 14 points a game and then giving 28 against this defense.
And he trusted the defense against the Raiders and they've got the win. He trusted the defense and punted, or I believe punted against the Broncos. Like they got to stop against the Broncos when they needed to. Like what are we doing here? They got to stop against the Chargers.
That's the whole point. You shouldn't have to get stops against the Broncos. It should be game over.
They weren't in that game, Jeff, because the quarterback threw 3 interceptions. It was a rare game where the quarterback turned the ball over. And like we're overfitting that the fact that Broncos, who never score points, got a bunch of short fields and were able to generate a little bit of good juju against the Chiefs. And now we're talking about this defense like it's the 0-3 defense. Petro,
listen, I want you to convince me, right? I want you to convince me.
I think it's an easy convince. The secondary's young. They're going through their lumps. They're growing. The pass rush got more sacks this week than they did last week. There's positives here, Soren.
The 7th round corner that everybody got excited about because the tight end didn't run a route and they threw it right to him and he ran it all the way back for a touchdown is getting beaten like a drum on a regular basis now. Let's call it what it is. Jalen Watson looks like a 7th round corner. Listen, here's like I said, I want you. By the way, I love this one. Thank you, Jeff. Eric, sit down. I want you to consider this. You just in lobbying for the defense pointed out what they did against the Raiders and what they did against the Broncos after telling us what they did against the Chargers. You continue to nominate teams that are not going to the playoffs as your evidence for why this defense is good.
People in the chat are saying I should have a mea culpa about Herbert. I thought Herbert was him, guys.
Listen. There's that. And then you just pointed out, you just said a Broncos offense that hasn't done anything, right? Those words came out of your mouth. And then your selling point is the Chiefs stopped that offense. Like you're not going to, your dots are so ass backwards here. Like your argument sucks. Like you're getting crushed in a high school debate here. I'm going to tell you.
I brought you. They're an average defense. That's always been the calculus, Soren. No one said there were going to be the 0-2 Bucks. They're an average defense. That's good enough for this team to win the Super Bowl.
Average equals trust.
Yes.
Okay.
I trust my Honda Civic to get me where I want to go. Is it a Porsche? No, but it gets me to the freaking grocery store. There's some trust there, Petro.
That's the best phrase you've had. That's the best evidence you've had.
Petro, I know you said, and I know I listened to your show Monday, you're like, oh, it's out the window that they'll ever be a top 8 to 12 defense. And I agree. That was my hope, right? But for them to win the Super Bowl, they need an average defense. And everybody, and I'm on the Twitter streets, right? I'm on there. I'm looking at, and there are very smart people who cover the Chiefs either as fans or as media members that are talking about this defense like it's the 0-3 defense.
By the way, analogy, perfect time to move on. I love this. Good Lord, man, the Civic.
That's where we've gone with this.
They are a below average defense. They're a 96 Honda Civic with new tires. Okay,
paint job.
Okay, fair enough. Let's do it. It is time to move on. I agree. It's good timing. Chris Jones. What is like right now, and I've talked about this on my radio show about that this is the time that Brett Veach and his staff, they're done with most of the games, and so they're now coming in and they're talking about free agents and they're looking through things, and they've got to formulate a plan for what it's going to be. Chris Jones, Is the plan to extend him, bring that number down to try to put more talent in? Is it to just play with him counting $27 million against the cap next year in the final year of his deal? If he'll show up and play, there are a lot of players of his caliber that would say, it's extension or I sit. Is it to trade him, Jeff? What's the conversation going on in your head about how Brett Veach should be preparing to handle the offseason with Chris Jones?
Until the last couple of weeks, I would have been on the keep Chris Jones side of this conversation. I think you have to think long and hard about finding the kind of deal. You're probably not going to get what you got for Tyreek Hill, but anything that gets you back a first-round pick that gives you some bargaining power, some ability to make some moves. I don't think this defense. I think we've seen the ceiling with Chris Jones in this defense. And I think he's a phenomenal player. I think he's been the best interior defensive lineman in football this year. But if what you're getting, to Eric's point, is an average defense out of it, then that's not going to help you 3-4 years down the road. I mean, you have to find a way to get an edge rusher. You got to find a way to keep adding to your secondary. And if that means, in fact, to be honest with you, if you find a way to get an offensive tackle out of it, that's nice too. But he's the biggest piece you have to dangle, and I don't see where it's worth it to keep having an average defense with a player you're going to pay a whole bunch of money to. To me, it's not worth it.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, I think with every single one of these decisions this year, you have to look at the average of the player, and you can't get drunk off of the highs and lows, right? We saw the same thing with Smith-Schuster. We're going to see the same thing with Jones. Jones, on average for the Chiefs, is a 9 out of 10, an 8 out of 10, right? But at some point in time, if you can, the 9s out of 10 in the NFL cost 10 out of 10. They do as veterans. So
they cost like 15 out of 10.
Right. I mean, relatively speaking, and we already seen them franchise tag Jones. We've already seen them have a hard time. I think he's probably not outperformed his contract, but he's outperformed his rookie deal. Like he's gotten better at a lot of things. He's shown some versatility as well, but the highs and lows just like keep me from wanting to give him the max deal. And it's also inconsistent with what the Chiefs have done, which is to say, no, Orlando Brown, we're not giving you the max. No, Tyreek Hill, we're not giving you the max. Everybody here is subordinate to Patrick Mahomes and to a lesser extent Travis Kelce. Kelce plays a unique position where he doesn't make as much as he's probably worth because of the tight end designation. So I think they have to consider trading him, and I think they have to understand that just because you took Karlaftis in round 1 of the 2022 draft, that should not keep you from taking an edge in round 1 of the 23 draft. Because I think that's their biggest weakness is they need another defensive end that can rush the passer to complement Karlaftis. I think their secondary and their linebackers are fine. I think they're going to grow into a role where we're going to be very satisfied with them, but they need a pass rusher on the outside, and it's too easy to neutralize guys on the inside.
Yeah, and I think, and you can, if you can just collapse the pocket a little better, and hopefully Brandon Williams is going to be able to help out in that department for this team this year, and hopefully that'll be enough to get them over the hump and win a championship. And I think that's the ideal scenario, is to win the championship, because I think it gets easier when you put a second ring on your finger. After trading Tyreek Hill, your fan base will buy into what you're doing if you move Chris Jones. I think they'll already buy into it more so with the season you're having after moving Tyreek Hill. It gets easier to do this deal than it did Tyreek Hill. I think you'd love to have Chris Jones. I saw somebody say, move on from Juju and Orlando Brown, keep Chris Jones. There is evidence that defensive tackles can play. I mean, Fletcher Cox is 32. He's still playing at a high level. Yep. I mean, if I look at the highest graded, have you looked at it, Eric? What the
I mean, look, Calais Campbell is still very effective. DeForest Buckner is still very effective. Aaron Donald is not young anymore. Fletcher Cox, to your point, Grady Jarrett, I think, has fallen off a little bit, but he's had a great career. Like, there's a number of players who you can grow into that position. I just wonder with Chris Jones, like, Jeff, you can maybe back me up on this, but like, Chris Jones is not an Adonis, right? He's a kind of a bigger guy, right? Like
Yeah.
he doesn't strike me like DeForest Buckner when you stand next to him at the Colts Stadium. You're like, okay, that's a different.
I object. Chris
Okay.
Jones is a brick shit house. I mean, he
Okay.
walks by you, you're like, yeah.
Okay, then I could be wrong. I feel like he's maybe I'm wrong because I feel like he's maybe a different body type than the DeForest Buckners and the Donalds and the guys who are really kind of that. But I could be wrong. But at the same time,
he's longer. He's more Richard Seymour. I mean, that was the comp.
That's a good comp. So, but you bring up Brandon Williams, like they also need to invest in a guy who can stop the run, right? And they gave Derek Nottie. Well, Derek Nottie's fourth year was terrible. His third year was great. They were expecting to give him a big deal. He hasn't done anything. They gave him a 1-year deal here. Kylan Saunders is probably maybe somebody they want to, but they probably do need to just think, okay, where are our resources? Well, we have a great pass rushing defensive tackle and a bunch of crap trying to stop the run, and we have like below average edge rushers. Let's get a guy who's cheap but sturdy stopping the run in the interior, and let's get a real edge rusher in the draft. And I think that that's probably a better approach than paying top dollar for Chris Jones.
Yeah, and I went through it. There are 3 premium left tackles and 3 premium edge rushers. If you look at most of the football grades, just for one, I said, listen, let's just throw it out there and say that this is what our in-house mock draft. If we're playing, Brett Veach and his staff here, Todd McShay, all 6 of those guys are gone in the first 15 picks. Yeah. And to be honest with you, I don't know that 5 quarterbacks or 4 quarterbacks are going to go up that high either. Let's see when they start working through it and find the. Remember, Malik Willis this time last year was going in the first round, right? And he didn't go to the 4th round. I think this is definitely a better quarterback class, but right now those guys were gone in the first 15 picks with like 4 quarterbacks in there. And so if those quarterbacks start falling, those guys start pushing up.
Yeah, but you'd also love to be where the Seahawks are right now when they traded Russell Wilson to Denver, and now they're looking at the 3rd pick in the draft.
Right.
Which you thought that would end up being like the 27th pick, the way things are supposed to work out. So
the Eagles,
catch lightning in a bottle.
The Eagles holding the Saints pick right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the Lions Jeff's Lions holding the Rams pick.
I always love trading for future firsts because you almost always get the value. You get the value of where they are today. But I think, if you've got any ability to kind of look over the horizon, you've got to be good enough to know that this team is.
There was a paper by Nobel Prize winning economist Richard Thaler and Cade Massey that basically said the discount rate on future picks is 50% higher than it should be, and it's almost entirely because the team that's trading for a player overestimates how good they'll be in the next year. Right? The ceiling is close. Like you're almost never going. The last year you saw it. Like it can top out at pick 32 if you're trading for Stafford, but it can bottom out at pick 3 if you're in the next year. And the expectation for the Rams is to be picking in pick 25 or so. So the fall there for the second one is much, much bigger than the raise up when they win a Super Bowl.
And almost anybody taking on a player that would give those kind of picks is playing Stars and Jags. And a couple of the stars go down and they bottom out fast.
Correct. I mean, that's the whole approach.
I think my approach headed in would be plan A is to trade Chris Jones. But I think that may have been plan A back when they signed him before, and pandemic may be part of it with a limited amount of cash. Nobody came calling. I think you head into the offseason planning on trading him, listening, hoping there are offers. If it doesn't happen, okay, plan B is keep him. I don't know that plan B keeps it. Plan B might bump Orlando Brown out of the mix, but I think they're going to sign him. The question is, does Orlando Brown hold out? Right? Like, and at that point, do you just walk on him? Because you're not going to get much for him in a trade, but you can't be talking about Trent Williams money. The offer they gave him last year, it would be a gift if they offered him that again this year. And he's right. Somebody put up there, he grades better than people may realize. He does. He's not a disaster.
Yeah.
Right? He's you just would like better.
He's a 6 out of 10, and he's asking for 9 out of 10 money. Like this is not
15 out of 10 money. All left tackles get 12 out of 10 if they're any good at all, and he's asking for 15.
I mean, the Chiefs have 2 really premium, 3 if you count Juju, 3 premium position needs, and the only way to address that in the draft sufficiently is to trade Chris Jones.
Yes, and I think that's plan A if you can get an acceptable return. Texans are next. Jeff, expectation, anything to be had in this game? I'll answer that question right away. No. All that you can do is look bad or get somebody hurt. There's nothing to be gained in playing the Houston Texans. Do you see anything?
I'm in the same boat. I see the same game, the game that should have happened this past weekend in Denver. Like they should go in there, get up on them early, and put them away. And so that if that doesn't happen, then yeah, we'll be sitting here having another conversation about what's happening. But I think after last week, they should do it this time.
Yeah, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chiefs will be on their best behavior because of what happened last week. I think Houston will let down because they had that interstate rivalry with Dallas. They played I thought they played a very, that Lovie Smith got them to play really hard. They're doing that 2 quarterback BS with Driscoll and who's the guy, that Davis Mills. So I thought that they were plunky last week. I was watching, like I said, with my friend who works for the Eagles. He was really rooting for Houston. And that didn't work out for them despite Dak playing poorly. So I think you're going to see a letdown from Houston. I think you're going to see the Chiefs on their best behavior. So I think 14 points actually seems low to me. But if you look at the Chiefs against the spread in the last couple of years, they've been terrible. Like, if you bet Chiefs against the spread since 2020, you've been broke. So, that's kind of the two competing factors in this one.
There's no reason to take the Texans unless you're taking every team that's getting 14 points or more, which is a mark where that in the NFL that runs a little bit above 500. So if you're doing it, if you're jumping on it because you think you've got it all figured out, no. I do. I like the Chiefs big. I think it gets out. I'll take 30. I'll take what the hell? Let's go to 41. 41-13. No. The defense 41-16. Jeff.
I think Andy and Lovey are pretty cool. I won't get that big. I think 31-10.
31-10. Eric?
The middle of the Denver game, I'm boarding my flight home, and I'm like, man, the Chiefs could get a shutout here. That would really do well for their numbers and get Jeff on board. Hopefully in the second quarter, I can say the same thing about Houston.
That plane came crashing down.
Yeah. I had to buy in-flight to watch the game. I think it's like 38-13. Yeah, 13 points is going to feel like a disappointment, but it's the way it is.
Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for us. We're back at it tomorrow with our Too Deep NFL podcast. You can join us at 9 p.m. Central at that time. For Jeff Chadiha, NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, saying thank you very much for joining us here for the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.